Hey, and thanks for coming by out on a limb with Gabby Allen. I have a huge pleasure today. You guys are gonna love this. It's Maria Imbalzano, and she is gonna come on and talk with us about all things writing and books and what she does. I'm pretty sure we're gonna laugh a couple of times because I'll tell you that I woke my dogs up earlier before we started recording. So I have high hopes for this one. And so we're going to just roll with my question that I always ask. And Maria, what is it that you do? And then how do you do it?
Great question, Misty. So I write contemporary romance slash women's fiction. And the reason why I include the women's fiction is because many of my books have the character arc of the heroine and having them come from a place, maybe not such a great place, and sort of growing through the book with the help of the hero, but also with the help of girlfriends. I'm a great proponent of girlfriends.
Yes. Yes.
So one of my series, the Sworn Sisters series, is for women, and each woman has their own book, but they're in each other's book. And the main character in each book has an issue. Excuse me.
No problem.
And so it's a women's fiction slash huge romance.
Yes.
Just 1 second.
Yep. No, you're fine. Don't even worry about it. I got tea over here. You are making the more healthy choice of water. Good for you.
Now, all of a sudden, I feel like my allergies are kicking in, but
I had a friend
it's
tell
August.
me that. Yeah, I had a friend tell me that yesterday that her allergy had started kicking in. I don't, why? Why does it have to be that way? I don't know.
I really, especially when I start talking, right?
I know it's irritating and it should stop because you don't like it. That's how that works.
That's
so
right.
when you're talking romance and women's fiction, because I tend to do the same thing. I really, really like books where like the main issue is the woman, and that he can absolutely be a part of her journey, but I kind of like her to do her own thing. And so was that a choice that you made at the beginning, or is that kind of what you slid into once you started writing?
That sort of happened as I started writing, because I do have two books that are before the Sworn Sister series, and I would call them generally romance.
Okay.
Although all of mine are single title contemporary romances, and there are big stories behind them. But I think this with the Sworn Sister series, because the women are based on my high school girlfriends, like not their real story, but their personalities.
Oh, that's awesome. Do they know that?
They do now.
You're like, hey, by the way, there's this book coming out next Tuesday. I just wanted to tell you that if anybody recognizes you,
it's so it's true. It's not them. It's not their story, because these stories have a lot of angst and emotional twists and turns, and it's not their story at all. But it is, a little bit based on their personalities, as well as some of their traits like hair color or eye color or something, or their jobs, their careers.
Okay.
But not all the time. But when I started writing this series, which this is such a long story when you really think about it.
We love long stories. Bring it on. This is like us. I'll sip my tea. You give me the story.
So when I first started writing, which I had no idea how to write fiction. I am not one of those people that always wanted to be a writer.
No, me either. Me either. I love those bios that they're like, I've been writing stories since I could hold a crayon. And I'm like, yeah, I wrote really bad plays, and then I wrote my high school alma mater. That's about the extent of my experience.
I hated it. I hated it in high school. I hated it in college. I didn't like writing until I went to law school, where I was writing briefs and
Mhm.
that kind of thing. And legal writing is much different than creative writing. It's
Right.
much different. It's very analytical
Mm.
and linear.
Right.
So it's, the creativeness comes in the arguments that you're making, but
Okay.
it's not creative writing.
Right.
But I read a lot. I always read stories. When I was little, I read Nancy Drew and
Yes.
Bobbsey Twins and
Yes.
whatever.
Yes.
So, I continued reading throughout all of my high school, my college, law school, working as a lawyer. And every night I would read before I went to bed. So one night I was already practicing law and I was reading a very well-known author. And she was annoying me.
Hold on. This is the story where it says, I could probably do better than this.
Right. Of course.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Don't we all do that?
Not alone.
We all do that. Yeah. Although I had no clue how to start.
No.
Or do that. But I said, I'd really like to try this. In addition to practicing law and having 2 little kids at the time. And
so you're an overachiever.
Being on boards and doing all the things that I was doing. I decide, I think I'm going to write a book.
As you do. I mean, why not?
Why not? So then I'm like, okay, so where do you start, right? Where do you start? So I always had ideas in my head of stories, because when I can't sleep, I make up stories in my head. So I have this story in my head, and across my desk at work comes a flyer for, we have to take continuing legal education credits. Yes. And the flyer was how to write a book in 14 days, a lawyer's guide.
Wow. Okay. So
I quickly signed up.
Yes.
The firm paid for it because I'm getting credits.
You're and like, hey, can you pay for my second career, please?
So I go to this seminar. It was in Edison, New Jersey. I don't know where you're from, Misty.
I'm in Pennsylvania, outside Harrisburg.
Oh, okay. So, Edison is just, some awful town in the middle of New Jersey. And I go to this seminar at this crappy hotel, and it's packed with all these would-be John Grishams.
Yes.
Well, all these lawyers who want to be a writer.
Yeah.
So I took this seminar, and it was fabulous. It was just a half a day, but it got me started. It was just, this is what you do to write a story.
Yeah.
So I got my idea, and I took the plotting outline that I had learned how to do in this seminar. And it took me probably a month to kind of, do this whole outline,
right?
Which they called a blueprint, because it's not just an outline; it's so in depth. And from there, it was very easy to write my story. Of course, I had no idea what I was doing, and I didn't know anything about point of view or dialogue or character arcs or goal motivation and conflict.
No, I did the same thing. My first book had 7 points of view.
Yeah.
Everybody had a point of view plus the dog. And I
everybody and they have a point of view. And right in the middle of the scene, right? There's like 7 point of views in a scene.
I sent that book to Harlequin, and the woman who rejected it was so nice. But I was like years later, it's a drawer, baby. Years later, I pulled it out and I was like, oh my gosh, they must have just been having a field day. Because in my query letter, you know how at the bottom you put like a paragraph that says kind of what credentials you have. My credential was that I had written my high school alma mater, and I actually met her years later, and she's like, oh no, we still talk about that. It's been 18 years. She's like, yep, still talk about it.
That is so funny.
So you're in this class, and you got your blueprint.
So I did my blueprint. I wrote this 400 something page story.
Wow. Wow. Overachiever.
And I had a friend who worked at a publishing company. He was a
Oh.
lawyer. And he said, well, send it to me and I'll give it to an editor there. She wrote a rejection letter, but it was like a 5-page rejection letter as opposed to,
Very nice.
We don't want this.
Yes. Unfortunately, this doesn't fit in our catalog. Please do not ever send anything again. Yes. Okay.
So it was very nice of her to sort of point out all the flaws in my
Places
story
for improvement,
which was great. So that's when I joined New Jersey Romance Writers.
Oh yes, I love them.
And RWA, Romance Writers of America, and I started going to seminars and conferences and reading how-to books and seeing the error of my ways.
That's okay. That's okay. Hey, I think it's interesting. Some people really like they will hammer themselves for not getting it right the first time. And my thought is, do you know how many people say I'd like to write a book and they never ever do? You
Right.
did. Like, that's step one.
It is step one.
It is.
So that book got tons of rejections even after I fixed it.
Yes.
And then I wrote a second book, and then I wrote a third book. So the third book is what eventually became the Sworn Sisters series.
Oh,
eventually,
cool.
many years later.
Yeah, yeah.
So the first book was called Weekend Diaries, and I wrote that back in 2003, maybe 2002, 2003.
Okay.
And I submitted it to the Put Your Heart in a Book contest, which is New Jersey Romance Writers unpublished contest, and I won.
Wow, that's awesome.
It was amazing. So I thought I am on my way. I am on my way.
Surely it's easy from here.
I did get an agent out of it.
Very nice.
And then it just didn't work out. Like the next 2 years, it really wasn't going anywhere or doing anything. And the agent wasn't working very hard for me. And it was just bad. So I finally fired her and decided to keep going, just keep writing. So I wrote another book. After that one. And then I wrote a fifth book. And that's the one that got published, my fifth book.
Hey, there is nothing wrong with that. One of my hopes for this podcast, and I talk about it pretty much on every single one, is I want to encourage people who think that you have to like have an MFA and you have to like have 12 books under your belt and you have to hit the New York Times bestseller list the first book out or you've failed. I just want you to try. And I love these stories that show listeners that it's rarely the first book that is gonna set you on fire. It takes work, but that it's all worth it. So book 5 got published. That's awesome. 5.
And not interestingly, but it was 13 years after I started, 15 years maybe after I started writing. So it was a very long time before I got published.
Okay.
It was 2013 and I started with that gem of an idea back in 1998.
Okay.
So it was a long time, but during that period of time, well, as I said, I did have this whole other life and career.
Yes.
And I wasn't writing all the time. I was trying to do as much as I could. And I was going to, as I said, seminars and conferences and just trying to get better. Reading how-to books and having a critique group and that kind of thing. So I signed my first contract in 2013.
That is wonderful.
A long time after I started.
But now you're 8 years in.
I'm 8 years in and I have 7 books out with one coming out in November.
Oh,
and it's good.
Yay.
It's all good.
That is a wonderful. I love it. So when you were working through the 5 books, did you feel like with each one, obviously you felt that that was the one. How did you decide that maybe that had run its course and we needed to start something new?
So what I would do after I would finish each one is I would initially try to get an agent involved. And after all those rejections, I would send them to whatever companies would take unagented manuscripts, which weren't a lot, but
no,
I would
especially not then.
Not back then.
No.
And so I finally said, back then you really didn't want to do the ebook route back then. Yes. Now that's all there is.
I know. It's so funny. I love talking to people who have been in as long as I have, because there are some people who are like 3 or 4 years in and they're like, oh yeah, I did ebooks and I did this and I'm like, you have no idea. Like, if you're not old enough to remember when the e-reader was not something you did, and really the only ebooks you got were if you wanted to read from Alora's Cave, like everything else was still very traditionally published thrust. Self-publishing was not a thing. If you self-published, that meant you were vanity publishing. That meant that you were not actually published. A lot of people were like, oh, that's not published. And they tried to say that about the ebooks until, with RWA's help, there was a lot of realizing that it wasn't going to replace paperbacks, but it definitely was going to add to them. And it made sense to encourage their members to try it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, even back then with query letters, it was sending everything by snail mail.
With your SASE, your self-addressed stamped envelope. Oh my gosh, I used to request Harlequin's guidelines, because they would put them out on a two-sided piece of paper. I used to request those every 3 months. And I was always like a flutter. I was sending a letter to Harlequin. I'm like, yeah, you're asking. But it was exciting. It was different.
But when you had to send a manuscript, you had to photocopy the whole book. And the cost of postage and
ridiculous. And again, say SE. And I always put a postcard in to ask them to mail that back to me, that they received it. And so I'll never forget going to I don't know why, but I'm at Hot Topic and I'm buying like all of these these really pretty postcards. And I actually got a letter on a sheet of notebook paper that said, I got your manuscript, but I'm keeping your postcard. Okay. Thank you.
That's funny.
Yeah. So I mean, I do like the speed that you can get things done now, and that you don't necessarily have to photocopy everything. But there was something very exciting about knowing that it was about the 3-month mark and you were hopefully going to be getting something in the mail.
Right. Well, I was never getting anything good.
So. Yeah, me neither. I went with a very small publisher when I got started. It was her. And I loved her. She taught me so much. And then I jumped into the Wild Rose Press, I think the next year, and I was doing the two at the same time. I didn't really try for an agent probably until I was about 6 or 7 years into writing, because I didn't think I was good enough to do it. And I misunderstood, I think, exactly what they could bring to the table. Now, I've had 2 agents and I have had to part ways with both of them. So I'm kind of in this, what is it that you want kind of place. But yeah, I mean, rejection, I had so many. I was like, certainly I could paper my bathroom with these.
That's for sure.
Yeah. But they still, I loved when the thing then was, if they sent you a personal note, you better pay attention.
Right.
So, now it's kind of like, if you don't get a form rejection via email that says, thank you so much, but unfortunately this isn't for us, you really should look at what they're saying. Were you getting some personalized rejections?
Yes, which was helpful, because then you could work on it.
Yeah.
At least it's something to work on.
Yeah.
So that was good. And then, as I said, eventually I did go with the Wild Rose Press, and
I love them.
I do. That's where all my books are published.
Your covers are amazing.
Oh, thank you.
They are beautiful. I was poking around in your website earlier just because I wanted to, make sure that I remembered who you were because I was like, okay, if you mess this up, that's not going to be good. But they really are very pretty, and I love your story ideas. So I was reading through like the blurbs that are on your website, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like the one with the guy who gets stage fright, and he's going to work with the woman who's setting up the review that's going to be in their little town. And I'm like, that has all of the things that I love about contemporary romance.
Right.
Well,
thank you.
Sure thing. Absolutely. My pleasure. I ordered one.
That was one of my favorite books to write, and it's a novella, actually.
Oh, okay.
So when the Wild Rose Press started putting out calls for different novella series that they were doing, at first I just ignored it. I said, I've never written a novella. I don't know how to do it.
Right.
I'm not going to do it. And but then at some point, I looked at the Dearborn Inn series, and I really loved the idea of that town. And I read some of the stories in the series, and I loved the stories and the characters.
Right.
So I thought, I'm going to learn how to write a novella. So I read quite a few, and then I looked at, I read about how to do it.
That is a skill. It is a skill. I don't think people understand that writing a novella is actually harder than it is to write an 80,000 word book, which is about standard contemporary romance, like 70 to 90, because you have to be on the ball with every single sentence.
Absolutely.
You have to condense what you normally would do in like 25 chapters into 6. And that's a tall order.
I don't know, lately I've been thinking that might be my calling. So I wrote 2 novellas.
Yes.
And both of them won the Nest Award in their categories.
Wow. Congratulations.
Which was just recently. Thank you. And then the Beverly Award, they're finalists against each other in the novella category.
You're like, well, I hope you lose. Well, I hope you lose too. Well, one of us is going to win. So.
Well, except that there's 2 other books.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know. My odds are better than the others, but
may your odds always be in your favor.
But I'm like,
that's
okay,
fantastic. That is
so fantastic. I'm winning some contests with these novellas. Maybe that's my calling.
It's very interesting. I like novellas. I have written. We shouldn't count. I'm pretty sure it's over 15. I did a series with the Wild Rose Press where I had 6 different novellas, and for every 3 they would put out a print book.
Right. They did that with one of ours too.
Okay. And so I loved that because a shorter story allows you also to have a shorter time frame, and you instead of having to stretch it out over months, like my short stories are usually like a 2 to 3 day thing. And so that's very fun because you're ramping and you're just going. So I balance both, because sometimes I'm like, okay, I'm tired of writing that short. I really need something where I can kind of linger a little. And then sometimes I've lingered and I'm like, okay, now I need something short. Please don't make me commit myself to another 80,000 word book. So do you go back and forth, or do you find yourself more drawn to the novellas now?
No, I do go back and forth. So in between my second and third Sworn Sisters book, is when I wrote my first novella in the Dearborn Inn series, which is A Song for Another Day. Very cool. Then I also, right around that same time, their ice cream stories came out, the One Scoop or Two, that series.
I'm going to be writing one of those.
So I wrote one, it's called The Blueberry Swirl Waltz. And,
I love it.
And it's actually a historical, believe it or not, because it takes place in 1951.
Do you know that the 80s are now considered historical?
I know, because it's 50 years.
No. No.
Because I
Not
kept
ready.
thinking, like 1951 doesn't sound historical.
No, but it's 70 years ago.
I know.
That's crazy.
So,
I just
so, so that was really fun to write because I set it at my grandmother's ice cream store in Roebling, New Jersey.
oh my gosh, how cool is that? I love
And
it.
and the heroine is kind of based on my mom, who was
Yeah.
an Arthur Murray's ballroom dance teacher.
My grandma danced for them.
Did
She
she?
passed away at 93 last year. And she danced for them from the time she danced for them when she was between 40 and 55. And then she started dancing for them again at 75 and danced until
Oh,
she was 92. She was
well,
still competing at 92.
that's
You had to be
amazing.
very careful of her because if you were in the kitchen at the same time she was, you better get ready to cha-cha. That's just all there's to it.
Well, my mom taught me all those cool dances, and
Oh,
actually,
how wonderful.
she's 94.
Is
It's
she?
interesting how you know
Yeah.
they live a long time.
Does she still dance?
So she's got some heart issues, so she
Mm.
gets winded. So
Okay.
she will, like,
Yeah.
around the house,
I
but
love their
and if we're
faces.
at a wedding or something, she
Oh,
might get up for one
all
dance.
holds are
But
gone at that point. I do love their faces when they're dancing. There is
yeah,
something very magical, I think is the only word I can really think of that would come across my grandmother's face when she was moving like that. And I was just like, you are so beautiful. Like you just it's like light is coming off of you as you are doing the thing. So that's really cool about, and I love that you are incorporating stuff in your stories. How fun is that?
well, the most fun was I interviewed my mom for 2 blog posts when I
Oh,
was writing the story.
I love it.
One was about the store when she was little,
Yes.
and just because I was pulling a lot of that information into my book, and the
Right.
other was her as a ballroom dance teacher. And so I posted both of the interviews on my website,
Oh,
and I have an old picture that I posted from back then. It's a terrible quality, but it's my
doesn't
mom
matter.
dancing.
Yep. Yep. Doesn't matter.
But it was a lot of fun because I felt like she was part of,
Yes.
the
Yes.
process. So
Absolutely. Well, and that was something I was going to ask you because I love rabbit trails. So sometimes we're like 20 minutes into a conversation and I'm asking you a question from the beginning. So when you're talking, I
that's
can't,
okay.
I
That's
can't
good.
help myself. So I also tend to base my people on parts of someone that I know, but then I like ratchet it up like 10 times,
Right.
so maybe a grandmother is like my grandmother, but she's like my grandmother under a magnifying glass that like has all the quirkiness of everything. So like the core of her is there, but I've also kind of given her things to make her over the top. So when you were talking about, using certain personality traits and stuff, I find that really helps me because it's almost like I can see them walking through my story at the beginning, but then at about the quarter half mark, they start becoming their own person. So do you find that that works for you
That is
also?
exactly how it
Okay.
happens, because
Awesome.
you do start with this germ of a person that's
Yeah.
based on somebody that you know,
Yeah.
but then you add all these characteristics and their backstory,
Yes.
right? Their whole backstory is different
Yeah.
from whoever you're basing them on,
Right.
and they become their own character.
Yeah. Yeah. They get stuck up there sometimes. I'm like, okay, look, I'm done with you. Can you move on? And they're like, no, I have another story. I'm like, no, no, you don't. So so the Sworn, that's a trilogy?
So there's 4 books
Okay.
to it. I
So it's
haven't,
quad.
the fourth one is not out
Oh,
yet.
okay.
Um, it's I wrote all 4 drafts before I sent the first one
Oh,
in.
wow.
And the reason for that, because I
Good for
know
you.
me, is that
You have to.
I was gonna change something about one
Mm.
of these women in the 4th book.
Ah.
And like if I changed their job or where they lived, it would ruin the whole thing.
Yeah.
So I wrote the first draft. The first book was done, and then I had the first draft of the other 3.
Oh, okay.
And then I sent in the first book.
That is awesome.
My publisher.
Right.
So then when it came time to do the second book, now the second book in the Sworn Sisters series was, let's jump back to 2003, the book that won the contest.
Oh, nicely done.
So, 10 years later, it became a published story
that is awesome.
In this Sworn Sister series. So then I just had published the third one, Sworn to Fly. But I waited for about a year between Sworn to Remember and Sworn to Fly, and that's when I was writing the 2 other novellas.
Okay.
So it was good. It was good to have that break from the Sworn Sisters for a while, and then come back to it. And I'm ready to do the 4th one. And as I said, it's done in draft.
Right.
But it needs a lot of work. Those first drafts need a lot of work.
Yes, they do. It's like you just get it out on the page, and you can always clean it up later. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I really do like your idea. It's interesting that you mentioned having written all 4 before you started submitting, because I never did that. And one of the things that I found was that my release schedule with the Wild Rose Press was staggered very weirdly, because if I got distracted and decided to write this, or if I wanted to write that, or if I wanted, so there wasn't a consistency. And I really was like, I really would like the consistency. Like, I really want to be able to say every 6 months or every year or whatever. And so I have started doing that. I'm 50 books in, and I'm changing my process. It is what it is, right? I mean, I think you have to continue to grow, but yeah, I have started, like, if I know it's going to be a trilogy, I'm writing all 3, because like you said, that I did have one where I changed something in the 3rd book, and I'm like, ooh, I would not have been able to do that if I had turned in the first one.
Right.
Because it was stuck. It was an integral part of the first book, and that wouldn't have gone well. I think that, for me, I really like the idea of having everything done so that if you are on a deadline, we talked earlier, and I've mentioned this before, but I had triple bypass surgery out of the blue. So if I had promised a book and then this starts happening, I'm out of luck. And there were a lot of things with, like, the anesthesia and stuff that kind of messed with my writing schedule. So I love that idea of kind of setting yourself up for success. I think is really what I'd like to think of that as, because it's done and you can figure out what happens next with it, but it's already done.
Right. And it's then it's much easier. I mean, you're not going to run into writer's block. I mean, you have the story,
right?
It's done.
Already there. Yeah.
But what you do see now, I haven't looked at that draft in probably 2 years. So it'll be fresh when I look at it, and I'll be able to see all the things that are missing, like plot holes, or maybe emotional arcs that aren't coming together.
Absolutely.
Or whatever it is. It's much easier to do once you've got it down on paper. So that is one thing that I don't have a problem with, is that writer's block, because going back to my plotting my books with the blueprint. Yes.
I love the idea of a blueprint. I've never called it that. I always had hives from calling it an outline, and I hate the word synopsis. So it'd be like, it's a timeline. It's a timeline of events, but I'm totally writing down blueprint. I think I'm going to make myself a blueprint.
Well, the blueprint, it's so in depth that it's so easy to, like, once I do it, it might take me a month to do that.
That's okay.
Because I'm coming up with the characters and who they are and their backstories and their goals and motivations and conflicts and all of that. and I'm coming up with the black moment and,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
the major conflicts that are happening throughout the story.
Yeah.
So once that's all done and you've got this, I do it in a notebook in
Ooh.
writing. In like, I love to write it out.
Yes. Is it a spiral ring notebook?
It is. It's a
College
spiral
ruled,
notebook.
college ruled or wide ruled?
Yeah.
Both.
Yeah. I guess it's whatever I pick up at the store. You
All
know,
right.
if I'm
That's
at
all right.
Walmart or wherever
Yeah.
you are buying
All right.
school supplies.
Yeah. My kid's 20 and I'll be at Walmart and I'm like 10-cent notebooks. I'm getting like 10 of them. Come on, it's only $1.
I love notebooks.
Yes.
So I have a notebook
Yes.
for each book
Everything.
with all this information and the blueprint.
Oh.
So that you could literally, if you didn't, I don't even have to start in the beginning, not that I wouldn't, but I could
Right.
start on chapter 5 and follow my blueprint and just write because it's all there.
Wow. You know, that is very, very cool. I love that idea. I love it. And I love that it's a way I haven't heard of doing it before. And so I love new information and sharing it with people so that, you know, maybe somebody will be like, I'm really struggling, but ooh, blueprint I can do, because there are as many ways to do this as there are people doing it.
There are.
And I love that you persisted and that you started in 2003 and in 2021 you're going strong with 7 books out. That is awesome. You know, and that it was something that you wanted, and so you kept up with it, because I think some people do get discouraged early on.
Oh,
like,
absolutely.
I got rejected. I'm not ever sending anything. And I'm like, no, please don't do that. It does take a while. Stephen King had enough rejections that he had to hold them up with a railroad spike. Okay. If you're not using a railroad spike, I don't want to hear from you. But I do think that some people are like, oh, I must not be good at this. Or maybe you are, and you just need a little more practice.
That's exactly it. And I think that in my head, it was like, yeah, it would be easy to give up because you fall into a funk when you get rejected.
Absolutely.
But if you don't keep going, you're never going to be published.
Yeah.
So it's like, what do you want? You know, what is it that you want?
And how badly do you want it?
Right, exactly.
Because it can be nasty out there, you know. Especially like I know for myself with because I've been publishing since 2005, so I have had a lot of friends like hit the USA Today bestseller list and then they don't write for a little while and it kind of backtracks their career. I've had friends that wrote and got the USA Today bestseller list, then made the New York Times bestseller list, and then they were off and flying. You know, I've had people who are with the Wild Rose Press and they've been writing for 25 years. So like a variety of different things. But in the meantime, you're also doing your own journey. And sometimes you're like, I want that. I think I want that. Maybe I want that. Should I want that? You know, and so when you are in the midst of it and you are seeing other people soar and you want that, you got to buckle down. It's not going to just happen because you wished upon a star. It's not going to be like, okay, so and so, you know, got picked up by this publisher. I'm going to be next. Not if you're not writing a book. if you're not writing, you know, because I see a lot of people who are like, oh, I've got to advertise here and I've got to do this and I have to do the blog and I have to do Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and why are we TikToking? And I'm like, well, those are all great and I'm glad that you're doing them all. However, are you also writing? Because if you're not writing, then there's no point in all of that. And if you are writing, you're probably getting rejected. Until, like, I will tell you that I love the Wild Rose Press because I don't worry too much about them rejecting me because I've been writing with them for a whole lot of years and I've had the same editor forever. And so I don't think I've ever sent something in and anyone's like, yeah, no, can't do that. And there have been things that they've asked to be changed, but I haven't really gotten rejected from them since I started. So when you find somebody that loves you, that can be a good place to stay too. And you have beautiful covers. I would be like, Can I stare at that? Like, are we getting a magnet for the refrigerator so I can look at it while I'm cooking dinner? I know. They're very pretty. And Wild Rose Press does a really good job with that kind of stuff.
They do. And I love that they take our input into their covers.
Yes. Thank you.
It's so nice of them to allow us to give them our vision of a cover
and then
work with that.
Yes. Yes. I write for Kensington also, which is where the Gabby Allen name comes in. I write cozy mysteries. Well, they're calling them rom cozies. So it's a rom-com mixed with a cozy, drinking a Mai Tai on a beach, I guess. And so I love them. They're a lot of fun. But, sometimes, like this time, I was like, okay, here's the book. And they're like, okay, here's the cover. And I was like, wait, I did what? Yeah. Oh, all right. I mean, super cute. Don't get me wrong. I love it. Love the cover. A lot of people love the cover. It's a little cat. He looks like he's sailing a boat. His flag's all over the place, little hat on. It's adorable. But because I've been with Wild Rose Press for so long, I am so used to, because Debbie Taylor has done every single cover I've ever had. And so Debbie, I'm like, okay, I want Debbie. Hey, Debbie, remember the time that we blah, blah, blah. Can you recreate that? You know what I mean? So like they do pay attention.
And they do. I've been using Diana Carlisle. Who and she's done probably 5 of the 7.
Yeah. She's covers. Good. She is really good. I just talked to somebody else from the Wild Press. Peggy Jager, I think, said that she Diana Carlisle also. And no, that's awesome. And they have really good people, but I also feel like one time I asked for something on the cover and they're like, that's not actually going to fly. Because I wanted like 7 things on there. And they're like, no, it's too busy. And I was like, what? No, it's not. And they're like, okay, look, as a thumbnail, that's too busy. And I was like, oh, you're right. Okay. I always encourage people to please understand that in the end, they're the ones who know what's selling.
Right.
So while they'll take your ideas and they want to give you what you want, because if you're not proud of a cover, you're not going to sell the book. They also have to, take into consideration that there are certain elements that don't do well on covers. So,
exactly.
Yeah.
And then also with the series, you try to keep them looking somewhat similar so that they look like they belong to a series. Yeah,
and so that someone will recognize it and hopefully pick up the next one. Or if you're doing a book signing, you have them out and they're like, I'll take, oh wait, there are 3 of them. I want all of them. Let's take them with me. I'm doing that. Yeah.
That's what we want.
Yes, that is the ideal situation. Oh, you haven't read any yet? Can I sell you all 6? Oh my gosh, we're at 45 minutes. That's awesome. I have had such a blast talking to you.
Well, it's been fun.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
And thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. Absolutely my pleasure. I'm so glad that we got a chance to talk. I see people's names all the time on the Wild Rose Press, and I'm like, okay, I don't always know who everybody is anymore, because when I started there were very few of us, and so you all knew each other, and now it's like, oh goodness, there are so many.
There's people. A lot.
But I do enjoy talking to you guys because I love seeing what everybody's doing, and then being able to put a face and a kind of story and a personality with a name is really fun. And I would love to have you back on if you want to do one when your next book comes out or whatever you're doing. I would be more than happy to have you back, because this was a blast. So tell us where we can find you. And then also you had said your next book is coming out in November 1st.
It's the Christmas Cookies series from the Wild Rose Press. I think I must have been one of the first ones with a book in.
Cool. Good.
And so it's November 1st, which I think is the earliest date. That's the earliest date I've seen for a release for that series. So that one is called Red Velvet Crinkles and Christmas Sprinkles. It's a mouthful.
I saw that cover. Where did I see that cover? I saw the cover
on the Wild Rose Press Facebook page for the Christmas Cookies series.
Yes. And I was like, oh, I want that cover.
Again, it was working with Diana Carlisle,
Yes.
and I sent her what I was thinking, but I was kind of torn. Like, do I want people on the cover, or do I just want Christmas cookies and like Christmassy stuff? So she sent me 4 different versions.
Nice.
And which was really nice of her.
Absolutely.
And I ended up picking the one with the people on it.
I love it. I love it. It's adorable. Yeah. It's adorable.
Thanks.
Who wouldn't want that on their Kindle or
thank you.
Nook or whatever it is that you're reading on? Very nice.
So then, anyway, but you could find me at my website, which is mariaimbalzano.com.
Okay.
So it's just my name.
Yeah.
And you know, all my books are up there, all the sale icons where they're sold.
Yeah.
And I write blogs once in a while, but not overwhelmingly. So it usually has to do with, you know, there's like a few blogs on every book that I've written that gives some of the backstory or where it came from or something that I think might be interesting.
Yeah. Why not? Why not? Well, your website is very pretty and it's very friendly.
That's what I need, friendly.
Yeah. There are websites that I'm like, I have fallen down the hole.
Right.
I do not know how to get back. All I wanted to do was look at your books and I don't even know where those are. So your website is very friendly. And as I've said many times before, for anybody who's listening, in the description box will be all of the links for Maria, so that you can click on them, find books, find information, find her blog. I really want to read that one about your mom dancing, so I'm going to go look for that one, and the ice cream shop. And then we'll keep a lookout on November 1st. And if anybody has any questions, the offer is always there. Go ahead and pop them into the comments section and I would be happy to share them with Maria. And you know, if we can answer something for you, we absolutely will. We're all about the learning and I'm sure that we'd be happy to, you know, give you a little push in the right direction. Not a shove. Well, it might be a shove. It depends on what your question is. But thank you again, Maria. This was so much fun. I cannot thank you enough for coming on here. And we'll look forward to seeing you again because I would love to talk to you at another time.
Great. Thanks, Misty. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So this is another one of those Out on a Limb with Gabby Allen. Hope you guys enjoyed pulling up a branch. Keep an eye out for the next one and or maybe just go back and listen to Maria and I laughing again because I found that pretty fun. Have a great day and please keep on writing.